What's up, gamers? We're here today to talk about the Smite 2 Closed Alpha 3 update notes. I'm joined by my support main teammate, Antique Chair, also known as Jesse. So today, let's get it started. First thing to talk about Conquest. We saw a lot of changes to Conquest. I think there were some good changes, some that it's going to be a callback to some of the Smite 1 days, but overall, I think we're moving towards a better, more stable Conquest. I don't think it's there yet, but a lot of improvements in this patch. What do you think?
Yeah, if you notice, if you look through the patch notes, they do mention the words like Smite 1 a lot. So they're really trying to help onboard new players and make it a smoother transition. Because definitely, when we first started, it felt like a whole different game. Like nothing we knew from Smite 1 transferred over, and it was very frustrating at times. This kind of helps create that on ramp for people.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us when we first started out, we expected we expected some differences, but those who were able to quickly adapt realized that there were a lot of things that Smite 1 and Smite 2 were not total transferred of skills and knowledge over, which I think was great in a way in that it did make for a new game for people to learn, but it also made a odd learning curve for those first couple alphas, and now we're in that closed alpha. Uh, we're no longer doing the weekends. This is a much more quicker pace now. That's 24/7. People are learning daily, and I think these changes are going to help those players, dropping Smite 1, coming over to Smite 2, and really adapt to the Conquest mode. Because I think, as we saw in prior games and then just being in those games, they were either long, unfortunate stomps for some people, or they just surrendered after 10 minutes because clearly one side knew the game and the other side had no clue what was going on.
Yeah, pretty much. So increasing that onboarding process, especially now because there's an actual meta. So new players are not going to have a fun time if they don't know what that is. So all these increases to the game are going to tell them, hey, this is generally what you should be doing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's get started with that first topic that I want to talk about, which is the Warhorn change. I think this is a big update to the solo lane. For those who didn't play prior and you're just hopping in now, the Warhorn was something that the solo laners fought over, much like the Totem of Ku in Smite 1. The way it worked was there was a center panel which you had to interact with the spacebar on, and it created a timer countdown. And once you completed there would be a warhorn sound that would be heard throughout the map. It meant the minions on your side were given champion minions, which had more damage and more health. So it was a extra buff for your team, but it was definitely a King of the Hill style objective to take. It wasn't like the Totem of Ku, and now they've changed it back to the Totem of Ku, where instead of holding a spot on the map, it's now damaging the totem again. But you also now get benefits from the totem being destroyed that are different, and you also get the champion minions again. So I think this is a welcome change to the solo lane. I know that for some people in Smite 1, it was seen as a slog for a long time. I know a lot of pros talked about solo lane just being boring, but I think in Smite 2, they're looking for more ways to make it a more fun and exciting place to fight.
Yeah, that's a good thing. The buff is a nice little bonus to keep people going. People always general restorative stats are things that people tend not to notice, but it's very good. If you have more HP, well, it was HP 5 in Smite Classic, but if you have more HP and mana regen stats, you can stay in fights longer and you get bigger backs and more pressure on the lane. And people don't notice that, and especially now because there's no movement speed items really, so getting that 5% move speed can actually be pretty noticeable. So that's a good way to give give the flow of game a bit of a change without making it so clearly overpowered like Fire Giant. Fire Giant's supposed to be powerful, and you notice that effect because it's supposed to be. This is a nice small little thing to keep fights going.
I do want to point out that other change that came to the Warhorn, now Totem of Ku, that gods within the pit of the totem take 20% less damage from gods outside of the pit. So now it does create that King of the Hill mentality that I like, where being on the totem isn't a total detriment. Like you do get some defensive benefit for being there, which then challenges the other team to say, "Hey, you have to come get me because you can't just shoot me from outside for free. I'm going to take reduced damage while going after this." I
Yep,
think,
and
yeah,
that's definitely a good way to fight, and it's good to where you're probably not going to get just random ulted if people rotate over to ult steal the totem, right? Like if Kukulkan wants to drop a giant dragon on it, he can. It's not going to hurt you that much because you'll take 20% less. That is something that people need to be aware of because the Warhorn and the champion minions are a massive buff. You should be having people rotate over to fight for that Warhorn. It's a big thing.
absolutely. All right, so let's move on to the next small topic. I know we'll just kind of go over like, inspiration. I'm glad that this is the purple buff for those who don't know by the names. I'm glad it's getting a little bit more love. I think it was one of those like lesser buffs on the map. You could make arguments against or for it being good or bad. I think Pathfinder, which is yellow, Caustic, which is red, and then the blue buff, which I'm not sure I remember that right now. But yeah, just remembering by the names is kind of a challenge. But I did think inspiration needed some help. So getting that extra life steal at rank 4, and then the 5% life steal upon reaching stacks for rank 2 is still more beneficial. So I really couldn't see the soul charges doing things during like those big fights when you already have tons of particles and other animations flying. So I think this is it's we're going back now to some of the older buffs, but I think it's still a welcome change for the duo lane, especially when you're a ADC looking to sustain yourself in that long lane.
Yeah, I could see those lifesteal things being better. That's something on your knowledge that I'm not gonna know because I've never noticed anything for purple buff. When people have it, don't have it, I don't think, oh, that person 100% out trades me as a support because they have more damage from the purple buff. I don't think that. I don't notice that. I only see it as, hey, the enemy ADC has farm. I'm taking it. That's all I've noticed. So hopefully you've seen these changes do better.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes in the long run. I mean, I think the buffs are a little different. In Smite One they were just straight stat sticks, and now these I think they're trying to make them more beneficial in other ways as like little ways to aid your character. But yeah, I mean we're still in alpha. We'll see where this goes, but I guess it's a welcome change for now. I am happy that it's upgraded from 3 to 6 though on the stack duration. 3 seconds just feels like no time at all.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get to the next big one, which are the base teleporters. Now, I know all you
Oh,
Jingwei
amazing.
mains are crying in your chairs right now, but how do we feel about these base teleporters that are active throughout the game? Obviously, as you destroy a tower, once you destroy that tier 2, it's no longer active. But while they are active, it is a way every 3 minutes and 30 seconds for the team, or your team, or the enemy team, to get back to lane faster. Do you think this is good for the game overall? Think it's bad for the game? Is it beneficial long term? How do we feel about the teleporters?
I see it as a fairly good thing because Smite has always tried to niche itself out as a more action-packed MOBA. Even from the very beginning of it, it functions a bit more like a normal action game, right? Left click is attack, WASD to move, 1, 2, 3, and 4 to use abilities by default, as opposed to any other MOBA type game where you use your mouse and left click to move your character and your W, Q, E, and R stuff to use your abilities like League of Legends. So already the game is designing itself to remind you of action games. So having it give you teleporters to send you back to the fight more often without having to get a dead item in the teleporter relic is really really good. And it's not like it's going to happen all that often. It's on what, a 4 minute cooldown, 210 seconds. Oh, that's more than a 4 minute cooldown. It's not like people are going to be zipping back to base,
No, It's,
back to
it's,
the
it's 3
tower.
minutes 30 seconds, but it's still quite
Okay.
a bit of time.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. About 3.5 minutes, yeah. That's still a very long time. So if you see someone fly back to the tower after you beat them, and then you kill them again, you'll get a good amount of pressure. It's not like all of your impact has disappeared from the map. And as we'll get into later with some of the item changes, the devs are very clearly telling the players, hey, we want you to deathmatch. They're looking for deathmatching right now because that's how they're going to test all the item builds, all the god balancing. If it's just a PvE macro game, nothing gets figured out. So they need deathmatching right now. That's probably going to change because if anyone's familiar with Smite Classic, that game was the betas were all over the place. So just because we're focusing deathmatching now is not going to be the way it will stay.
Yeah, I think the big thing about the teleport is that it's almost a signal of who is winning or losing a game in a way as well, because when you use it, you can see it as the enemy team. It's not like the players just reappear at the tower. It's a teleport that's relatively fast moving compared to running or any of your movement abilities, but you can see this white purplish orb flying to a tower. So that kind of gives a signal of this person has now used their teleport. There's going to be a 3.5 minute window where if we can put this person down again, we can get a push on this lane's tower. And having those little moments, and I always talk about this in every conquest game, is you want little windows to make a push somewhere. That's all you're really asking for is, can I create a window for my jungle and my support, or even the solo to rotate over out of his or her lane, or the mid to come out of their lane to come to mine if I'm in duo, to make a push where someone has used their get back to lane card. Those little moments of this is down, they can't use it, time to make a push here, could be the difference between making a push and then before letting them come back to that lane and to defend it again. Because as we've talked about with some of our other teammates in our Discord, we don't like turtling mechanics. We think it ruins games, but defense is an important part of Smite. So give us creative ways to break defense. And if we can't do it offensively, then we need to get better at the game. So I think the teleporters are going to be a great offensive and defensive tool. Like you said, it's allowing for the game to be faster in a way. It's getting people to deathmatch because now they know they can get back into the fight again, at least for the next for the next use of it. So I think overall it's a good addition. All right, so we got some adjustments to like the fire minions and the minotaurs, which are noticeable because now they're not going to be as crazy of a siege weapon as they used to be, but still very deadly in the long run of the game. But I want to talk about the last big adjustment that I think is really significant for Conquest, which is the Ancient Fury. In the prior patches, we know the Ancient Fury was a hotly contested boss on the map. That ability to put all structures down across your enemy team's base was quite a fearful thing if you were on the losing side of most of the fights in a game. But now it's kind of been scaled back. It's brought down to earth a little bit. The effect is now all enemy structures are disabled for 120 seconds on the enemy's frontmost structures. So the ones behind, so if there's any structures behind, those aren't affected by the Ancient Fury. The damage is reduced by 25% less, and attack speed reduced by 50%. So now you're getting that Emperor's Armor buff that you would get from buying the item back in Smite 1, now in Smite 2 as a Ancient Fury reward. So overall, I think this is a good change in that it doesn't feel as incredibly overpowered, but you still get a lot of benefit from going for the Ancient Fury. Alrighty, let's move on to Arena. Well, this is a little short note here. Fix an issue where Arena jungle bots are spawning late and added some logic to the Arena ticket calculations that bring it closer in line with Smite 1. I don't know how many Arena games you've been playing lately, but I do think that they are also another wasteland right now where you can get caught with teammates who haven't played Arena before. They're just trying things out and learning the buttons and their abilities of their god. But for people who are very experienced with Arena, it is a massive death ball right now.
Yep, fairly simple stuff.
For sure. All right, let's move on to consumables. So, new consumable, the multi potion, was within the game for, I don't know, not too long, and then taken out. So, not much to say there. Hopefully, they'll get that back in the game. Uh, just the mana potion adjustments and the health potion adjustments. Just the healing on both these from 20 HP per second to 10 seconds to 15 per HP per second per 14 seconds. Increases total HP gain from 200 to 210, but it takes longer to restore it. I mean, I don't really feel that in game because like I'm paying attention more to the actual fights. So I'm just glad that it's now in a way where I think a lot of players are gonna at least feel the health coming back faster. But overall, the consumables is just a welcome change, I suppose. Let's go into item balance. I think this is where the meat of this patch really shines. And let's talk about how the major cooldown cooldown items have played a role in this patch.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll tell you right now, there's two gods that I think of immediately, mainly in the mage role, Baron Samdi and Nuwa, where these cooldown changes have been quite impactful. Uh, first off, for Baron having one of his abilities affected by like the healing affected by the cooldown rate, and then Nuwa with her ability to spawn tons of clay soldiers, have her abilities up seemingly every 5 seconds, and dropping her fire shards in less than 60 seconds. I think cooldown in this patch has been clearly the stat they want to focus on at high res to where it's more balanced for the game.
Yeah, I can see that, especially given the fact that they're using a new calculation algorithm. Because if you notice, all the numbers are not percentages because they're not running off a percentage system the way Smite Classic is. So these are kind of a diminishing returns thing. So your first one or two cooldown items will be a huge value, and then afterwards you're kind of putting too much cost into not much return. So it's an interesting way for them to design it. So obviously they want to test that as much as they can by incentivizing players to just go nuts with getting cooldown. Definitely right now it's something interesting to be aware of. It's not amazingly fun, I'll personally say, just fighting every single Baron and Nuwa in every single game, watching them ability dump every 3 seconds. But, you get used to it, I guess.
Yeah, and overall, I mean, it's not just like it's those two, but I did mention them because
No,
they definitely
yeah,
are some of the more ability dumping characters.
they,
But but overall, just it goes back to what we said about Conquest earlier. The devs want us to deathmatch, and they want ability usage to be a core of the current game right now. So as an ADC, I feel a little left out, especially when hunters mainly their cooldowns are so high, and as an ADC, you're not really building cooldown into your into your kit. It's a little discouraging to know that most of your AA is wasted upon because the enemy team is just dumping you with their abilities, and with the nerf to crit in the last patch, and that ability to like burn down the enemy team quickly, you still kind of can with Soul and Jingwei. I'd say are your two biggest AA crit hunters out there, but if you're gonna play CERN like an ADC hunter or even Anubis right now, they're sorry not Anubis on her. On her's having a little bit of trouble against some of these ability dumpers, and
I am looking forward to this as an enjoyer of Ares because his passive gives more intelligence the more cooldown you build, and 50% of that power goes to your teammates. So if you go intelligence scaling mage ADCs with an Ares, that could be some dirty numbers.
yes, and I've seen it in our own personal games when I play Neath and I'm near you. The 2-1 combo near your Ares is a very, very massive chunk out of most of the other damage characters on the enemy team. If you catch someone in a 2-1 as Neath, you might kill him. It's
Yep.
it's a big jump, especially once you get those late game elixirs of strength and intelligence. You're easily hitting past 1,000, if not more. Okay, let's talk about a little bit about Sundering Arc. So I know it's one of those relics that's gonna cause quite a divide over certain topics. I know it's one of contention and even in our own Discord, and it was most recently a topic of contention when a certain pro gamer was kicked out of his team. But Sundering Arc has been nerfed. Formula damage will be now 200 at level 1 plus 25 damage per level, reaching 500 at level 14, capping at 500. I still think this is a really good relic. That's just my personal opinion. I will tell you right now, I've used it in multiple ways, especially on character or especially in roles that you traditionally wouldn't see them in. I like having it on my ADC because I'm able to secure more camps, steal more camps, help my team secure objectives. It really shines when you have those contested buffs and you want to get them for your team or you want to steal buffs away from the enemy team. Having that Sunder down or even just having a little bit of extra damage to fire within your combo, I still think Sundering Arc is in a good place.
Yeah, I mean, I'm as a support man. I miss the days of Hand of the Gods, and Sundering is technically Hand of the Gods, which they've immediately nerfed. But I think it's still a very good and potent item. It's something that I think now you don't want to use it as an execute on large jungle camps because 500 HP is not a lot. So trying to sneak in and kill a fire giant when the enemy team at a late game they can do 500 damage almost instantly. So thinking that you're going to dash into the fire pit and steal it is not likely unless you use another ability. So I would definitely say use this to either stack it and get multiple damage takes on the fire giant. You know, if two of you have sundering, that's 1,000 damage out of the fire giant's health already. It's a good way to start out a fight to do it faster, to throw people's calculations off, or just clear camps faster. It's a fairly short relic cooldown. So a big thing that you can do is just take the camps faster so you can really keep your momentum going. And definitely stealing camps, stealing resources is really big because that will increase the power of your buffs by stealing theirs, so that you're getting a lot of value out of stealing camps.
Yeah, I think stealing is much more impactful in Smite 2 now, especially with the buff stacking to get those extra benefits. Denying those to the enemy team is always a massive way to push them down and slow their scaling. I do think that when you're using a single Sunder for stealing objectives, you're putting yourself at a pretty big risk. Like you're really hoping that you can outtime the enemy team when it comes to damage being calculated in. So, as a single solo person trying to steal something, I would recommend against it unless you have a nuke falling behind you. So, like, let's say you're Kukulkan, you fire your ult early, and you try to combo hitting the Sunder as your Spirit of the Nine Winds also impacts the objective. But even then, is that worth the value you're going to get out of winning the team fight in the fight or going for that steal and missing it? It's a lot to consider now because you don't have that big Sunder anymore. And while that nerf have the total damage, it's still beneficial in small spots, but definitely not as impactful as it used to be when it was doing 1,000 damage at max. Okay, so we got some carry buffs, some tank nerfs, and some other meta nerfs that go into this current patch. I'll just say for the carry buffs, for a lot of these, I don't really feel it. The biggest one that I feel is on Dagger of Frenzy, having the cooldown from 50 to 30 seconds. You get to use it almost every fight. It's definitely noticeable, even by the calculation. 30 seconds goes by like nothing in Smite 2. So you proc it in one fight, let it go. Next thing you know, you're gonna have that thing again. So you can siege a lot better now if you use it to take down towers. You don't have to hold it as often. I would say every chance you get, go ahead and toggle Dagger of Frenzy and let it rip. This is more for you, I would say, as a tank in the game. Spirit Robe having the protections decreased, and also from the passive ability, Oni Hunter's Garb, losing a little bit of their magical protections and Eye of Providence. I thought Oni Hunter's Guard was one of those items that felt pretty like powerful, and I almost thought it was a mandatory item for solos, and maybe not mandatory, but definitely one of those items that a support should fit in their kit every game. But overall, I think the prots are just in a weird space. Sometimes sometimes it seems like characters, like certain gods, are unkillable, and sometimes it seems like I'll watch one of my tanks walk forward and they'll get vaporized. So between those changes, I don't really know where tanks are in this meta.
Yeah, I mean that's something that I really noticed once I started reading those patch notes, and I really understood what the devs were trying to do as soon as they said, "Hey, we're buffing a whole bunch of damage items and we're nerfing tanks." I'm like, "Okay, so you want me to deathmatch? You want me to build Bruiser as a support, and you're looking for fights, which is fair." It's just the general gist of gameplay right now, and I think a lot of people really do what's the word? Like they definitely sort of undervalue the power of bruiser builds. Doing some kind of damage, because if you just build pure defense, you don't offer a whole lot to your team afterwards. So building that bruiser will allow you to peel people off, set up kills, and even get things on your own and really set up your team, because it's really good if you set up a big ult like an Athena ult or an Amir ult, and all of a sudden it takes out 60% of somebody's life before your team comes in.
Yeah, I will say there have been a lot of moments, especially in our conquest matches, where there have been, whether it's the ADC or the enemy support, they don't respect the damage of a bruiser support, and they pay for it early, especially when those like early mid game fights come along, and you think, oh, this is an Emir or an Ares. They won't hurt that. Oh my God, where's my health bar? And then you see the enemy ADC or mage coming in behind them, or the jungle as well coming in behind a support who's just put you down to half, and you know that all it takes is for one of those damage dealers to use their full combo, and you're gone. Respecting that bruiser damage now is part of the game. It's just part of that brawling mentality they want us to all adapt.
Yep, definitely. I mean, as you said, we've had plenty of games where I'll be way up ahead of you trying to make space or just doing whatever, and I know you're doing something else, which is perfectly fine, and they think, oh, this support's an idiot. He's way out of position, and then all of a sudden I ult them for 390 with 1 point in my ult, and they weren't ready for that.
Yep, I think damage on supports is going to be something mandatory, at least for the going patch until there's a reason to go full prod again. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what the Smite devs cook up in the next patch and how they want us to adapt in the next gameplay switch. Now, I'm going to skip a lot of these item changes, mainly because there have been some self patches since where they've adjusted a lot of these again. So some of the stuff is a little bit outdated. I do want to go into the new gods because we've been fighting these now for about a week and a half, and we get to really see how they perform and kind of the things that have uh, come to light as they play the game. But we'll start off with Baron. I'm going to tell you right now, I think it's hilarious that they built Baron this way. I think he's way overtuned. I don't know if even they play tested it or realized in the PTS servers that when they released him out to us, he was going to be this ridiculous. I'm not going to say he's broken, but he is a pain to fight, mainly because of the cooldown affecting his heal scaling. So there really is no penalty in a way for not going lifesteal. As Baron, you just get all your healing from increasing your cooldown, which means you're now this ability spamming mage that controls most of the fights that he's in.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely very um, multifaceted, I guess. I mean, he's always been a support-ish mage. Like, there's definitely, if somebody plays Baron support, I don't immediately think they're throwing the game. Whereas, somebody who locked in I don't know, a Kukulkan or an Anubis support, I know they're just throwing the game. So that percentage heal is definitely something that's wild because even if you don't build him support, you're still going to get massive heals. So you can have the survivability almost of a support because you can cleanse slows, give yourself a move speed, and then also heal what 60, okay, maybe not 60%, but a good 40% of your health in one move. That's pretty impressive. So that's one thing that most people aren't really ready for. It's an
Yeah,
interesting design in the game philosophy right now with how mixed everything is, because how everything sort of does this hybrid scaling where a lot of characters will scale off of intelligence and strength and prots or a mixture of all the three. It's an interesting way to see how the game will go and how the pro scene can go through it much later. It's adding a lot of good tech to the game, which would be the issue with Smite back in the day, where it wasn't too technical because it was so deathmatch heavy. So they're trying to balance that out, which is a nice thing to see from this game.
yeah. I wonder how in the long run those hybrid scaling characters are going to perform relative to like the uh, single stat kind of characters. I do think they need to get some attention, or they might get left behind.
Oh
I
yeah, I do not envy the guy who has to redesign these on new season updates. I
they
don't
might
envy that guy.
they might need a team for this instead of just one guy, hopefully, because it's just one dude. I'll send him like a gift back of a gift basket or something, because if he's not, or a guy or a gal, whoever they are, if they're probably going to be crying in their computer trying to do all this math and figure out the way to balance these hybrid characters versus the single damage types. I do want to comment on like the hysteria for Baron. At least as someone who's played him a few times, the little bar under the health is sometimes hard to see. I can see it just fine because I have a nice big monitor and I'm not going to make excuses for it, but I think a better visual of that, maybe like a circle under. I don't know. I can't even. I'm just throwing out suggestions here. Like a circle under the god, which has like a filling up meter or something, but something to give the user a little more indication of how much hysteria you've applied to the enemy god. I mean, I guess like the bar is the best we can do without being like overly cumbersome of just stuff on your screen, but maybe that's just a personal criticism of mine.
Yeah, definitely. There's a I'm not really sure why the Baron hysteria is so hard to see because I thought it was fairly easy to understand in Smite Classic. I don't know why they had to change it like that, but sure. Uh, One extra little piece of hidden tech for the Baron as well is you can get Baron's Brew if he's on your team. However, if he's not on your team, you can hit I to bring up the consumables menu, and if you look on the consumables list, the Baron's Brew is there, even if he's not on your team, so you can still buy it and use it as a item. I'm fairly certain that's unintended, so hopefully
It
that will be fixed.
Yeah, they'll fix it, but for now, enjoy it. It's definitely a bug, and I make sure if Baron's in the Conquest game, I am looking to grab that Baron's Brew, even if I'm not on their team. All right, let's move on down to Yamoja. So I've had some mixed experiences with Yamoja. I've seen some insane gameplay of Yamojas coming out of solo lane with double-digit kills in a game, and then I've seen Yamoja as support be wholly useless for other than a highway to teleport her team. But overall, I still think she's in an okay place. I'm not gonna say she's good or great, but the damage that she's outputting now is definitely something that had to be scaled down. Because I did see some games where Yamoja was hitting as hard as some of the mid game mages fully built.
Yeah, which is interesting because Yamoja was pretty much a throw in every role that wasn't support in Smite Classic. However, in this one, I don't know. I still feel fairly what's the word, underwhelmed by her. I don't really notice all that much. Like if I play into a Yamoja, I don't feel anything. I don't notice them, really getting their support, their ADC out of things, or popping off some good stuff. From what I remember, I believe her ult may or may not be bugged right now because I know half the time I use Phantom Shell to go through her ult, it doesn't actually go through the ult, so you're stuck in there regardless. So it's fairly good as an ultimate against people who don't have jumps or use their jumps to engage, like, Bacchus or so. Other than that, I think, yeah, probably going into some Bruiser to help her scaling is probably something that is good for her, and you can sort of build her more flex now, where I have seen the most effective emojis tend to be either solos or mids, ironically, as opposed to the full healing support cheese, which is fair. That's kind of boring.
Yeah, and there are different ways to reduce healing in Smite 2, and with the exception of Baron, it's not overly egregious. And from the games prior when I played Honor, I actually have some footage up where I had 3 lifesteal items on her, but again, those items have been since adjusted, so lifesteal isn't as great as it used to be either. I don't think her in a healing meta, well, that doesn't even exist, but her as a straight healer and defensive support is all that impactful. I I will say when River's Rebuke is put up, I'm not as worried about it as I used to be in Smite 1. I don't think the damage is there yet. Maybe that needs to be upgraded a little bit. I know the slow and the mesmerize aren't that hard to adjust your aim for. So as an ADC, there's been moments where I'm just not worried about her ultimate. I think there's better ways to make it impactful. I know part of that comes from positioning and how to form that form those walls so that it traps in the enemy team. But just given the Smite 2's map layout, you really want to use this in jungle in most places where you can get that benefit of those tight chokes and locking players in. I think when it comes to siege defense, her walls are best at just holding back the enemy team for a few seconds, or locking them in once they're in Phoenix. But if they're able to get that deep anyways, or they have no fear of being that deep, it's probably just a waste at that point. Okay, let's look at some of the god balancing. I think a lot of these are pretty straightforward when it comes to cooldown reductions, base damage changes. The new obviously the new one nerfs I talked about in my guide for her. Um, I do want to talk about Anubis because he got some serious love in this last patch, and I've been watching some of the weekends vids play Anubis. I personally played Anubis a few games, and once you get out of that early game, he is in he is definitely intimidating to fight 1v1.
Yeah, definitely. I haven't seen much after that first update day. There was one guy who went Anubis solo against us, and the guy was an absolute planet. He was untouchable in every way. So that was a interesting experience. But besides that, I do like that they make him a bit more varied now as a character. Besides just me build lifesteal and then cry when you build divine rune first.
I will say he still is quite a bit of a lifesteal cheese in a way from the scaling. I have some footage. I haven't put it up yet, but I was playing a mirror match of Anubis in mid lane. I was beating him because I had built more lifesteal early. We have a mid game exchange where he ults me in the jungle, and to counter his ultimate, I ult him back, and we just watch our health bars literally swap, where his goes down as he's ulting me, and mine goes up as I'm ulting him. And then, as this change happens, I stop and watch the Loki come in to execute him. So it was one of those moments of yes, he's not as big of a lifesteal cheese as he used to be, but it is still fun to watch people die from your lifesteal because they didn't build it first.
True. However, I do think that's just sort of lifesteal in general. Like, if you go like our buddy, he goes Fenrir solo and builds a lot of lifesteal, and everything that is on the map is a fountain to him.
Yeah, I think Fenrir needs to be brought down when it comes to his lifesteal because I remember in one of my recordings his basic was returning 240 numbers, which is 80. So 80 health a swipe, and then doing that to a jungle camp. That's three targets, 80 apiece, 240 a swipe. He's basically healed the full in 5 swipes. And yeah, when everything's a fountain like that, there's an issue there. Fountain should be fountain, and jungle camps should be jungle camps. Okay, so lastly, we got some general gameplay updates. I will say the big thing that I wanted to talk about here, because I don't think there's too much here I want to go over. They did add a pause. Now, I'm not sure this is correct because I don't know how it's been used in some games, but can the enemy team like cancel your pause? Because I've noticed where we've gotten a successful pause off, and then all of a sudden it just gets ended early.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure because a lot of the input on the game is fairly vague. Because originally in Smite Classic, if you hit a pause, it would say who paused it, so you can kind of have an idea as to who put the vote up and then who canceled it, whatnot. Even F6 votes, surrender votes, would say like, oh, so and so wants to surrender, but in this game, it just comes up as a thing and yes or no. It's kind of vague, so it's hard to tell if it was the enemy who skipped it uh, or your own teammate. I'm not sure. I would venture to guess that you can technically end other people's pauses. So you're just sort of on the honor system. If your enemy DCs and wishes to pause to wait for their buddy to come back, it's kind of on the honor system for you to not end their pause.
Yeah, and with with how stable this game has been for me, which I would say 96% of my matches go without a hitch. The other 3%, either one of my teammates will DC or I'll DC. I will say, compared to Smite 1, Smite 2, even in its alpha stage, has been very stable on my computer and with my connection. So it hasn't happened to me a whole lot, but I do notice that there are some games where enemy players or one of my teammates, they'll DC, and not being able to pause in the past was quite a pain because that usually just meant if you weren't in comms with your other teammates, they want to check out and leave because they think that person's not coming back. Or if you do have teammates that want to fight with you and continue on the game while you're gone, you have no way to pause it, so they're just kind of stuck fighting this 5v4 or worse, and there's nothing really you can do until you log back in. So that's possibly 1 to 3 minutes where you're out, and that could mean an objective, that could mean a structure. So I'm glad that they're fixing this and they've added it to the game. It just needs to be improved so that it's actually effective in its current state, which it's not. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we'll see where the pause goes in the future patch. Hopefully this is just another thing they're ironing out before it goes into open beta. But progress, for the sake of progress, is still somewhat beneficial. Um, so there were also a lot of bug fixes. I know that I'll leave the link in the description to these notes, so if you want to read a lot of these. But the one thing I mainly want to talk about for this patch, at least when it comes to bug fixes, is body blocking. I am so glad that body blocks are now working again. Nothing is more fun than using an ability to misplace somebody or displace them into a certain spot on the map. I know I've done this before as on her, where I will use my jump, knock them up in the air, use the stun to pin them against the wall, immediately throw up my pillar, and then body block them into into a wall so they can't get out because they don't have a jump, like a leap or a teleport. I think that's one of the funniest things to do in this game. I think getting your team to surround somebody and body block them into a wall is funny. It's so much more fun now to body block, and it actually makes a lot of sense with a lot of the tanks to be that wall. If your abilities are down and you can't CC the opponent, just run in front of them and say, "Oh, you can't go here. I'm slowing you down." it gives people like me an extra wall, their own body.
Yeah, it's very good technicality, and especially because I know a lot of times with how janky the body blocks could be in Smite Classic, I half the time I didn't even know if it was a body block or just some weird issue with clipping. I couldn't tell. So this one gives you much clearer feedback as to yeah, that was, you actually intentionally body blocking somebody or you getting blocked by somebody.
Yeah,
So that's nice.
there's definitely a very obvious like visual look to the body block, and then you can also see from the character models like where, and you can anticipate where the enemy is going to go, so you can get in front, and knowing that you're physically touching him in game is accounting for a body block, which will then mess up how they have to move around. So if they're W keying right into you, and they don't use A or D to strafe a sideways, or you move their mouse cursor to change their direction of walking, they're going to be stuck there and they're not going to move. And that is something hilarious to see, but also frustrating to have happen to you. So it's now just something you have to be conscious about in the game. If an enemy's in front of you and they're purposely body blocking you, it's either time to use one of your movement abilities or open a can of whoop ass. Because if not, you're probably going to die.
Yeah, definitely. Just the general increase in understanding as well is nice. Just being able to understand where you're getting stuck on. That was just a big thing for me back in the day.
Yeah, for sure. That's our breakdown of the Smite patch notes. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.